Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting of the Desert Water Agency Board of Directors on October 15th, 2024. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Some housekeeping. I'm asking that folks who are participating virtually, if you could keep your microphones on mute and until you are ready to speak during public comment. And for those of us in the boardroom, if you could silence your electronic devices for the same purpose, that would be great. And I will call on directors in the following roll call order: Director Gracia, Director Bloomer, Secretary Treasurer McKenna, Vice President Bowman, and President Ortega. And all votes will be conducted via roll call. And with that, I would ask Director Bloomer to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Thank you. Thank you. Well, with that, we can move to our roll call. Ms. Baca, would you please?
Director Gracia,
Present.
Director Bloomer,
Present.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Present.
Vice President Bowman,
Here.
and President Ortega.
Present.
All present.
Thank you. Item 4 on our agenda is for public comments not on today's agenda. So these would be things that would be relevant to the work of the Desert Water Agency, but not necessarily on today's agenda. And with that, if there are members of the public who would like to speak, we ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. And as provided in the Brown Act, the board is prohibited from acting on any items that are not listed on today's agenda. Ms. Baca, have we received any public comments?
No comments have been received.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public attending virtually or in the room today that would like to speak on an item not on today's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to item 5. Similarly, this is for public comment on items that are on today's agenda. And with that, if there are members of the public who would like to speak on an agenda item today, please come forward or raise your hand virtually. Seeing none, we'll move to our next agenda item, which is our consent calendar. Items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon in one motion of the board without discussion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a board member requests a specific item to be discussed and or removed from the consent calendar for separate action. So we have 3 items on today's consent calendar. Do I have any board members who would like to pull one of these items for future conversation? Seeing none, I will look for a motion to accept the consent calendar.
Mr. President, I move we adopt the consent calendar as presented.
Thank you. Look for a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a first from Director Gracia, a second from Director Bloomer. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next would be our General Manager's report.
Thank you, President Ortega and members of the board. For the first 2 items, I'd like to hand it over to Ms. Lort and Victoria and have her go through those items.
Thank you, General Manager Johnson. Good morning, President Ortega and members of the board. So today I'm going to start off by talking about our landscaper workshop that was held on October 8th. The conservation team and the public affairs team is really a true team effort, put this together. It was held here in the boardroom where we had more than 25 attendees, and the entire room was packed, including this table here, and staff sat at the dais. So the participation was very encouraging. And so this workshop was aimed at our landscapers within the community. We talked about the new Making Conservation a California Way of Life regulations. We also talked about the non-functional turf prohibition that was coming up. And then we also went step by step through our rebate process for our turf removal through our droplet portal. And we also had a presentation from the city of Palm Springs talking about their plan check process for turf conversion projects. And we also had representation from the city of Cathedral City as well. So as you can see here, there's some photos, and it was a really engaging presentation. The city provided some great remarks. They also talked about trees and their tree initiatives, which was something that we as DWA could not necessarily speak to. And the landscapers had a ton of questions about that too. So there were a lot of questions, a lot of engagement. It's an annual workshop, and so we're looking forward to next year. And I just really want to give a shout out to the conservation team for putting everything, for putting such a detailed presentation together. The next item on the second page is a recap of a recent visit to Washington, D.C. I was there for a Women in Government Relations conference, and I also took the time with our federal advocates, Water Strategies, to have a few meetings. We met with staff from Senator Alex Padilla's office, Senator LaFonza Butler's office, and Congressman Ken Calvert. We also met directly with Congressman Raul Ruiz and his staff. We also took a meeting with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. We met with John Watts, and if that name's familiar, he used to be the water staffer for Senator Dianne Feinstein, and Travis Yance. And I was very pleased to see that John Watts knew who Desert Water Agency was, and he carried a lot of his information over, of course, from his time with Dianne Feinstein. And so what we talked about at this meeting, it's also here on the third and fourth page, really the fourth page, is this new handout that was created. It's a federal priorities handout. And this is, one more page down, perfect. This is something that whenever we have meetings with our federal delegation, we'll be updating it yearly, and we'll leave it behind with them. And so we talked about 4 main priorities related to the Colorado River water quality and salinity. We expressed our support for the Paradox Valley unit. We additionally talked about continued support and increased funding from the USBR, and also, of course, thanked the USBR for their continued support of our rebate programs through the Small Scale Water Efficiency Grants Program. And a huge thing is talking about our support for amending the federal tax code to allow for water conservation rebates to be not considered taxable income. And I'm actually happy to report that the Monday after we met with Congressman Ruiz's office, we got a message from his staffer that he signed on as a co-sponsor to that bill. It's the Water Tax Conservation Parity Act. Just a quick update on that. There is a large amount of sponsorships and bipartisan support for that act and for that bill, but they don't imagine it's going to happen this year. However, next year in the next Congress, there are quite a few Trump tax laws that are expiring. And so they imagine that this will be a vehicle next year that, since it's reopening the tax code, that we may be able to see something about water conservation rebates in there. So it's very exciting. And then lastly, the congressman had invited me, Congressman Ruiz, to be his guest at the Congressional Speaker Series, which was held at the Library of Congress that same evening. So it was a very fruitful visit. I don't think I've ever had a congressman after a meeting declare his sponsorship and support for a bill. So it was great that that was as a result of Desert Water Agency's visit. So.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Lort. Okay, the next item on the GM report is our end of summer employee appreciation luncheon. This is a luncheon we do every year at the end of each summer. It's in appreciation for the hard work that staff does, and also for staying safe during those hot summer months. We had Papa Heads, a food truck come and give us some smash burgers and fries and some soda. So it was a good summer for us as far as heat related injuries. We only had 2 employees who had some issues. So it was a very hot summer. To only have 2 employees was very successful for our staff. We emphasize heat-related situations and training every month prior to the summer, and then as we were working through the summer. So I think that training pays off. Here we have our pipeline system leak data. The pipelines in the dark blue are pipes that had some leaks. We're expecting to replace those in the summer of 2025. And in the teal color, we will be looking at the summer of 2026. And then Vista Chino is a separate pipeline that we are currently designing that we're hoping to have get that replaced in 2025 too, summer. For HR meetings and activities, just wanted to highlight that there was 3 separate interviews that occurred. There was operations technician interview on the 25th, and then on the 1st of October, administrative assistant interviews, and then on the 8th, we had a safety and training specialist interview. So. And then for the GM's meeting and activities, just some highlights. I met with the conservation department on the 2nd, and they updated me on the events that they're working on. And then on the 3rd, I then had an IT department update. Yesterday, Assistant GM Tate and I met in person with MWD and CBWD in Riverside to go through our coordination meeting. That's a meeting that we typically hold once a month via phone calls, but this meeting we held in person at the treatment plant in Riverside, Met's treatment plant, and thought it was a very productive meeting. And with that, be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Director Grasha, do you have any questions for our general manager?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay. Director
Great,
Boomer?
great report.
None for me.
Okay. Secretary Treasurer McKenna?
I have none, thanks.
Okay. And Vice President Bowman?
None from me.
Okay. I have a couple of comments, I think. One, I was happy to see that there was some participation from the city of Cathedral City. I'm encouraged by that because seems like we've had very little, if any, contact with them before, and that the city of Palm Springs was well represented at this landscaper workshop. That made me happy. And then for our general manager, I'm curious about your meeting. You have a field meeting with Oswett representative. Is that for Prescott Preserve?
That was a meeting to walk through possibly getting some land for our booster for our recycled water system for Sunrise Park. That system currently has a small booster that feeds the high school. To get Sunrise Park online, we need a larger booster system. And ideally, the best location would be somewhere on the Oswett Preserve property area. So we went with them to discuss the possibilities of that. And I reached out to our attorney, and there's some things that we think we can do. And I think Oswett said it was very positive. So we're looking to see if we can get that booster on site there, and I'll keep you posted on how that goes.
Okay, thank you. That's it then. We can move to, that would be item 8, Director's Reports on Meetings and Events attended on behalf of the agency. And I'll start with Director Grasha.
Thank you. On October 2nd, I attended an Aqua water cybersecurity instant response preparedness seminar that I must say went quite deep. It's a three-part series. I think the third part will end in a tabletop exercise. It's quite fascinating to hear about all the things going on throughout the nation in terms of water facilities being interrupted in various ways. I found it very interesting. On the 3rd, I attended the Desert Valley Builders Association legislative meeting, which was very well attended. And then on later that afternoon, the Desert Hot Springs State of the City. And on the 4th, Riverside County Water Task Force had their quarterly meeting, and it was directed specifically on the subject of artificial intelligence at the water sphere. And as my position on AI kind of evolves, I've got to say Western Water is, they seem to be focusing a lot on this. I think they've got people being assigned, and it occurred to me that we might want to keep an eye on in some way how other agencies are adapting this technology into their systems. When I think back on the ways technology have evolved in just my time, I remember there was an answering machine that we would have, a mimeographer that you would have to crank by hand, and we've come a long way to be able to watch meetings on our phones while we're, driving to another meeting, in fact. So it'll be interesting to see how this all unwinds. On the 8th, CVWD board meeting, they had a rather lengthy agenda item on the Delta Conveyance Project. Graham Bradner, who is the executive director of the Delta Conveyance Project, and Carrie Buckman provided a nearly 2-hour presentation to the board on current funding needs of the DCP. And of course, this involves us as well. I expect at some point this might be coming around to us. We'll see how that plays out. But it was a very enlightening agenda item. And on the 10th, Aqua energy projects and California wastewater treatment systems. They talked about various ways of empowering wastewater plants. We're watching Mission Springs kind of go down that road now with their solar purchase, and they in this meeting focused on converting their fats, oils, and so forth to energy to power their plant. It was quite interesting. Didn't seem complicated to them, but it seemed like it would take a lot of fog to be able to power a power plant. But that was nice to learn about. And then that brings us to today.
Thank you. Director Bloomer?
I just have a couple things. On October 3rd, I also attended the Desert Hot Springs State of the City, and we were well represented there. And this was non-compensable. On October 5th, I was down at the Chamber of Commerce car show in downtown Palm Springs, and my job was to hand out cans of Desert Water Agency water. So everyone was very thankful and couldn't believe that it was tap water in the can. So it was good. And that's it.
Thank you. Is Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
I attended the State of the City address by the Mayor Mattis in Desert Hot Springs on October 3rd. October 10th and 11th, I went to the Aqua Regional meeting on water challenges faced by the San Joaquin Valley agriculture industry on the 10th anniversary of Sigma. I noticed that the Kings County Farm Bureau has obtained an injunction against the state imposing probationary status on groundwater pumpers in that area. And the basis for that was lack of clarity and lack of proper procedure in developing the regulatory framework that Sigma provides for. Quite significantly, the State Water Resources Control Board seemed to have missed the public input part of the process. And I think it makes Sigma basically unenforceable at this point until they go through a proper procedure. So it's a significant piece of information that I gained at that conference. On a lighter note, driving up I-5, you see lots of these signs that say, food grows where water flows. And well, that's certainly true. I'm very tempted to unroll a banner next to them that says, ground slumps where water pumps, because you know the ability of the State Water Project to handle flow is impaired by subsidence in the San Joaquin Valley. And that's going to be a big problem in the future. So that was it for me.
Right, thank you. Vice President Bowman.
I had attended the executive committee on 1010 and did security training on yesterday, 1014, and I was on vacation the rest of the time.
Okay. Thank you. I also attended the State of the City in Desert Hot Springs on the 3rd of October. It was a very well-attended event. I was pleased to see so many different organizations there and represented. And then also attended last Friday, the Aqua Region 9, 6, and 7 event that Secretary Treasurer McKenna just spoke of. I was actually quite taken aback by the comments regarding Sigma and its the suit brought by the King County Farm Bureau and the injunction that was granted. It seemed to be very sloppy and not something I would have expected from the State Water Resources Control Board. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. We're, of course, not in the same position as King County and Kern County and Fresno County and so on and so on. So we don't have the same kind of investment that they perhaps do in terms of pushing back on those probationary determinations. But yeah, it was a little startling to learn that. One of the other things that came out of that meeting, there was a discussion on what was really sort of a overview of economic and environmental impacts related to Sigma. And one of the comments that the presenter made that I found very interesting was that she said something like, "And we need more storage, and we need to pay for it, and we need to be able to. I can't remember exact phrasing. It was something we need more storage, and we need to be able to pay for it." And the first thing I of course thought of was sites, and I thought, why aren't you mentioning that? You know, that's a perfect example of what you're talking about, but that didn't happen. It was almost like that project didn't even exist. And then the other thing that both Secretary Treasurer McKenna and I had noticed was and I might have mentioned this before, I can't recall, the number of tequila, agave tequiliana orchards that you pass, or crops or farms or whatever you want to call it, that you pass along the way as you approach Harris Ranch, which is where this conference was held. And I actually tried to backtrack on the country roads to find out where these places actually are, and wasn't successful in doing that. But they're quite visible from the highway. So I'm curious to see that appears to be an alternate crop for some farmers, at least, experimenting with in that part of the Central Valley. And with that, I don't have anything else to report. So we can move on to director's comments and requests. That would be item number 9. And we'll start with Director Gracia.
Thank you. I have no comments or requests.
Okay, thank you. Director Bloomer.
No comments or requests.
Secretary Jermet. Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
Well, I do have a few. I was struck partly because of the Sigma regulations being adopted without public input. We realized our general plan was also adopted without public input. And I see a stark contrast between what cities and counties do, in fact, are required to do. When they adopt the general plan, they have to have public input, they have to have meetings, they have to develop alternatives. And we did none of that. Now, presumably the regulatory framework is different for CEQA, but it still concerns me. We adopted a general plan, it was published on Thursday and adopted on Tuesday, with very little debate. And two of our directors, at least, have not read it. So that plan needs to go. Anyway, on another topic, I was asking my Alexa something during the weekend, asked a question, and often it misunderstands the question or mishears it. And so it came back with an answer that said, there are 141 countries that are smaller in area than California, which is not what I asked. But it's an odd fact, and it makes me realize that what we do in California is extremely important. We are bigger than 141 countries. Our policy on climate change and sustainability, it matters just because of our size, not to mention the fact that we have $3.6 trillion economy running here. So what do we do to reverse the climate calamity that's occurring out there? It's inflicting a lot of devastation on people here, people near here, people far from here. It's radically important and radically urgent. And I have two quotes for you this week. One is from the late Professor Wangari Maathai, a Kenyan environmentalist and Nobel Peace Prize winner. He once said, "Mother Nature is very generous, but can be unforgiving. If you destroy nature, it will destroy you." Definitely worth thinking about. And on the question of urgency, I have a favorite quote on urgency. And it comes from the I Have a Dream speech by Martin Luther King Jr. And it was completely lost because of the soaring and majestic rhetoric that followed it. But like paragraph 3 of his speech, he said, "We are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late." That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman.
Nothing from me.
Okay, nothing else from me. So, with that, we can close this part of the public meeting and move into closed session. And it is about 8:30, so at 8:40, if we could meet in the board. We're reconvening into open session. I can state that we had no reportable actions taken.
Recording in progress.
Sorry. All right. Welcome back to open session. I can report that we had no reportable actions taken during closed session. And with that, we're adjourning the meeting until November 5th, I believe. Yes. Thank you.